Yesterday I talked about a Mulrooney speech where he talked about the government's passing the torch and like being aware of the plan, essentially. And you can interpret this in a couple of ways, but I found the speech, so I wanted to mention it within this guideline, like within this context. Excuse me, not this guideline. Within this context, this idea that now speech is and should be managed in a way on the internet, etc., to cut down on hate and stuff. It seems like something that is in line with what Mr. Mulrooney is talking about here, right? He says, it was the continuum of sensible and effective policies under 4 different governments led by prime ministers of different political stripes, avoiding the erratic policy lurches of the past that changed Canadian attitudes and provided a solid economic foundation on which Prime Minister Harper was able to stand when he welcomed world leaders to Canada a few years ago. How did this happen? Did not happen overnight, nor under one government, nor under one political party. It happened because for the better part of almost 30 years, 4 governments of different political stripes followed similar economic policies that generated stable economic growth, solid job creation, sensible public financing, and a more confident national fabric. The essential continuity of government from Mulrooney through Chrétien and Martin to Harper explains a great deal of what is right about Canada today. No one should underestimate the value of this continuity. Serious public policy can only be conceived and practiced over decades, not 4-year terms. We've had the great good fortune to see governments of different stripes pass and accept the torch over the past 30 years. Wouldn't it be beneficial if the people who were governed in a system understood the system they were governed under, rather than this like ad hoc post like, didn't we do great this past 40 years, right? Aren't you happy with where we are, right? Sure, you didn't have any say in it because we were, governments of different stripes who were, one government was kicked out to bring in another government and presumably change, right? Remember Hope and Change, Mr. Obama? Mr. Obama. And that's not Canada, just one of the political slogans. Like, Canadians vote out politicians. Like, if everything's working, you'll probably win again. But if everything isn't working, you'll lose because Canadians want something that is not being delivered by the current government. So hearing that since Mulrooney, right, through to Harper and presumably Trudeau, and Trudeau to a lesser degree, look at what he's done to the budget, right? He's got a blank check, right? He's taken the anonymity, the secretive 30-year plan that we didn't know about. We thought we had 4-year terms, right? Or, we were giving people terms, and what had really happened is somewhere in a back room somewhere, they'd all decided to follow this, whatever policy this is that they're talking about. And we got caught out. We got removed from the decision, but it's a whole pantomime, right? Like, okay, well, whoever comes in, we'll just continue on these policies, right? It seems a very flawed way to do this. Here's Michael Geist giving a recap of what Bill C-10 went through. He says, so what just happened with Bill C-10? A short tweet stream. It starts with the Liberal gag order that limited committee debate to 5 hours and then moved directly to voting on any remaining amendments. Details here, and he links it. Once the 5 hours were up, committee chair Scott Sims ruled that the only amendments that could be voted on were Green Party amendments. Since they had already been moved, all other amendments from all other parties could not be voted on. The Liberals, NDP, and Bloc MPs voted to overrule the chair and allow for dozens of amendments to be voted on without publicly disclosing the text, engaging in debate, or having experts available. The committee proceeded to pass many amendments the public had never seen. As an aside, the last NDP MP told the House of Commons she was forced to vote on amendments without even discussing them. In fact, she voted to overrule the chair to allow just that to occur. Bill C-10 was then reported back from committee to the House, and the government moved for a second gag order to limit debate and get the bill passed. Government MP Blake Richards challenged the committee's decision to vote on amendments that had not been moved. The Speaker of the House of Commons just ruled the committee extended its authority, and those amendments were ruled null and void. They are now struck from the bill. What next? The government will presumably try to have the full House vote on the amendments to get Bill C-10 back on track, but their plans for a rapid vote with limited debate seemingly won't happen with no shortage of parliamentary procedure questions on the way. So it looks like for the time being, our speech is a little bit protected, but I've told you before, and I'll prove this in other things I'll have to show you. I've told you before, though, that they don't really need C-10. I'm already seeing massive censorship on new channels that I start. Massive censor, and I'm not uploading as many videos yet, but I will be starting shortly to get more videos populating Canada Poly Shorts. So look for that. But I've already seen the censorship. Like I said, 2 years ago, I suppose, I had 3 times the audience I have now. They cut my audience in half, and then they cut my audience in half again, and now it's a half again. And there are days, I think, where they test cutting my views in half again, like they being YouTube. So it's a very interesting situation to know that the major tech companies are already complying with proposed structures of this law, C10, when it's being held up in the House of Commons, and it doesn't have any force yet. It's not been offered royal assent or anything to that effect. And yet I can't come up with a better explanation for why this censorship is happening. Is YouTube independently coming up with that? Is Twitter independently silencing people? Well, the answer is not really. No, it seems like the government is actually asking them to do that. And C10 is enshrining that in law, but I think it's happening anyway, right? And here's why. Here's what makes me think that. Montana Daily Gazette. This is from an archive, but the archive is from the Montana Daily Gazette. Exclusive documents, and this is from May 25th of this year. Documents show big tech is censoring public at the request of the U.S. government. Documents made available in a federal lawsuit demonstrate that big tech has an agreement with the U.S. government to censor American citizens. It's not just a left-right issue. Whether Republicans or Democrats, there's an actual written agreement between big tech and at least one state government to censor people who are critical of politicians. The deep state documents are now a matter of public record, made available by Dr. Shiva, and I'm not going to say his last name, Shiva A. And according to the court record, the judge presiding over the case has insisted on the documents being entered into the public record because they're absolutely revolutionary. So I'll leave that there. Here's Dr. Shiva's website. I saw a Dr. Shiva interview, and it was very interesting. And in the interview, I can't remember who it was with. In the interview, he was talking about how he got locked out of Twitter for putting something that he knew to be true, and like he was a medical doctor and blah, blah, blah. So he went after Twitter because they locked him out of his account. And what he ended up finding was that it was the U.S. government that had set the rules that had locked Twitter, that had made Twitter lock him out of his account. And so I thought that was really interesting. And I thought I often say, like, things that are happening in Ontario, not just happening here, like critical race theory, gender theory. These things are being pushed anywhere there's a school board with centralized control. They're being pushed hard, and they're doing end runs around legislation with teachers and after school and gay straight alliance clubs, all sorts of different ways. And I've documented it as well in critical race theory. They use the same tricks to get critical race theory into the schools and the classrooms. They use the same tricks to get gender theory in as well. So the same thing is happening in a lot of different places. So if Twitter is silencing this doctor at the behest of the U.S. government, that is notable. And it looks like it's plausible to extrapolate that out to other countries. Why wouldn't, if it's good for the U.S., why wouldn't Justin Trudeau go, hey, if Trump can do that, I can call up good old Jack, right? And if Trump and Trudeau can do that, well, so can Boris, so can Jacinta, so can all of the other, Western leaders. Hey guys, we've got a really good way to control political opposition here, right? How about we just make sure that their hashtags don't trend? How about we just make sure that all the bots understand that these people are crackpots, right? How about that? Right? So it's a very interesting situation where the press is operating, Twitter is operating hand in glove and enforcing what seemed to be the framework for laws that the Canadian government is trying to already pass.